because you have kept my command to persevere, I will also keep you from the hour of trial which shall come upon the whole world to test those who dwell on the earth. Now, the hour of trial and that great test, I believe, will be the mark of the beast. It will be, this hour of trial. It's going to be a great tribulation period. Now, I don't believe it's going to be 7 years long. The Bible says those plagues will come in one day. So it's like, even if it's a prophetic year, that's only one literal year for that one prophetic day. But that being said, this is talking to the Church of Philadelphia. Well, however you spin it, the Church of Philadelphia is not talking about the church of the last days. That's the Church of Laodicea. So this church, in fact, is the church that comes right before the Church of Laodicea, which the Church of Laodicea is the one who will endure that hour of trial and that test which will come upon the whole world. And so the Church of Philadelphia was spared that. And that Church of Philadelphia was that church that came before 1844. It was the church that was part of the Great Revival and the Great Reformation and the great building up of God's kingdom. And that led into the last day final church, the Church of Laodicea. And so Philadelphia was spared from having that. So that's what it's talking about. I will keep you from the hour of trial which shall come. And so it's not talking about a particular group of people in the very last days, but rather a church time period. There's 7 ages of the church here, from the time of Ephesus down to the time of the end. And so that's about that. Now, the other question came in, and let's try to tackle it before I get started here. And it is, what does the Bible teach about tithes and offerings? Well, I think that deserves a whole night dedicated to itself. And so I'm just going to say a couple words on it here. But if you have questions remaining, by all means, please, chat with me afterward or whatever, and I can give you more details about tithes and offerings. So the thing is, in the Old Testament, God made it very clear, and this is actually before the time of Israel. This goes back to Abraham. God talked about how Abraham paid tithes of all that he was gaining to, let me get this started here. He paid tithes to Melchizedek. And then you can read about that in the book of Hebrews as well, chapter 7, as he talks about tithing. Now, tithing was basically a system in which everything we own and possess belongs to who? God, right? And so we don't own anything, really. If you think about it, God owns everything. But God gives us as stewards, what we have to use, but He says, look, give me back 10%, and that 10% is what's called tithe, is a symbol of loyalty and faithfulness. It's a symbol that you trust me, God says, and it's a prevention to covetousness. And so God's people of all ages, faithful, have always paid tithe. And so people ask, well, what about the New Testament? Should we continue to pay tithe in the New Testament? If so, to who? Well, Jesus said this in Matthew chapter 23 and verse 23. He says, you pay, talking to the Pharisees, right, the hypocrites, he says, you pay tithe of mint and anise and cumin. He says, but you neglect the greater or the weightier matters of the law, love, justice, and mercy. These you ought to have done and not left the others undone. What is Jesus saying there? He's saying that, we need to make sure in all our focus of the law that we're not neglecting the more important matters that deal with love and justice and mercy. That said, that doesn't mean that as we return tithes and offerings that, we just no longer, or excuse me, let me put it like this. In showing love doesn't mean we can take the money that doesn't belong to us. It belongs to God. In fact, when you read in the book of Malachi chapter 3, God specifically says by withholding tithes and offerings, you're actually robbing God. And robbery is a pretty serious thing, and you don't want to be caught robbing God. And so, anyway, so the principle of tithing is certainly a New Testament principle as well. Unless we saw something in the New Testament where it said we throw it away or it's undone or it doesn't matter anymore, it's certainly something to be kept. Offering is not necessarily 10%. It can be 10%, but it could be 5%, it could be 15%. Offering just comes down to giving